President Kagame, thank you so much for joining us again at the Global Security Forum. Let me just start and ask you, when I last saw you and spoke with you, it was on the edge of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. Have you noticed any difference, real difference, in the presence of the United States in Africa? Are we doing any things differently, or are we glossing over and just everything's largely the same, where the United States is not as invested in Africa as much as it should be?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I want to see it this way, that and give benefit of the doubt that the results coming out of that summit, U.S. Africa summit, wouldn't really show as fast as that. I'm sure there is work in progress. Maybe you have to wait and see in the near future, and we may see tangible results. I don't know, but I can't say for now that yes, this has come out already and things are moving in the right direction. I think it is too early to tell, but the fact that there was this step from the beginning, for me, it's important. The rest is to build on what was discussed and different viewpoints that came up, and move towards the results that you all want to see. It shouldn't just be, or shouldn't have been a summit for the sake of it. It should be having tangible results out of that.
Well, let me ask you, Mr. President, one of the other areas we've discussed in the past is you're very ambitious about Rwanda's economic development aspirations. You have talked about wanting to see Rwanda one day as the Singapore of Africa, and moving rapidly and leapfrogging, if you will, through raising human capital standards, investment, and creating of biopharmaceutical plants and things of this sort. How is that going? Are you moving fast enough on the economic development front of Rwanda?
Well, I would say so far so good. There is a significant progress. Could we have moved faster than we have? Maybe. But there are always going to be factors that will affect the wished pace that we wanted to see. Some of the factors are external, and there's not much we can do about that. But those things that are within our means and possibilities, we try our best and have seen good progress. Even where we have come from and where we are now, we see many positive changes in the development of human capital or other social development indicators. We see tremendous progress. We still want to see more. There's a lot more to do. So we have to navigate these complications and challenges that exist not only within Rwanda, but more so even outside of Rwanda, whether it is the African continent or looking at the whole globe. There are these factors that affect us, but it is to be expected. I don't think we can only develop just because things are easy or good for us. So whether you look at the health indicators for our population, life expectancy rates that we have obtained so far, the economic growth we have registered over many years, the political and governance stability we have registered that in fact has enabled all that to happen. Name it. I think we have really made good progress, and it's not by accident. It's the fact that by the fact that Rwandans have been mobilized, they've been ready, they are contributing, they are participating, and yeah, so, and we have come out, all of us as a country, to understand what we want, where we have come from, the challenges at hand that we have to face without any excuses from anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get to some of the security issues, but before that, I want to recognize that a few days ago was International Women's Day, and you came out with a very, very strong statement that I found uncharacteristic of many of your other leaders on the continent, strongly supportive of women's rights and really asserting that that is part of Rwanda's profile, commitment, etc. How do you feel that differentiation in Africa, and what will it take to bring some of your fellow heads of government to that perspective?
The broader discussion is really to be not that of just numbers. We're not talking about women empowerment or gender equality. We are talking about, yes, to an extent, the numbers in as far as those who are touched, who participate, who is concerned, but we're also talking about the real quality of that. Do they participate? Are they given the freedom and all the tools they are available to them, like they are available to men in our society? Are they aware of what needs to be done? All of us, are we aware, and do we work together? I think this is what and for us, the support for this kind of progress is not just recent. From the beginning, this is where we started from. And we have continued. We have measurable results, and we want to see that in year to year, we can measure and say, where have we been and where are we now and what is it that needs to be done, and then integrate that in all the actions of our different programs and within that vision. So we see that I think tangible results have really come out, and we want to continue to do that. In any case, we see the benefits in real terms, social, economic, political. You can see it. You can, so to just be not so intelligent to really deny yourself the kind of benefits and progress that come with all that.
I mean, it just stood out to me as a very, strong statement of support on International Women's Day, and it's one that I did not feel or see. But let me just mention another issue that's unusual. I frankly don't know every dimension of it, but I would love to hear how you think about it and whether Rwandans think it's a sound arrangement. But you have a bilateral arrangement with Rishi Sunak, with the Prime Minister of UK, with the UK and Rwanda, on essentially return for asylum seekers. And I'm interested in this deal. Who gets what, and does Rwanda like it?
Well, the migration partnership and deal, if you will, between Rwanda and UK is not the first of its kind. Well, but it's more defined or better defined in this case, if you will, but it started earlier in the years. Rwanda, for the last, say, 20 years, has not had less than 100,000 refugees or people moving for one reason or another from other countries to Rwanda. This is to be on record. And from that time, we even had, I think I have had the opportunity to explain this to you. We had this situation one time in Libya where, mainly young Africans were caught up in that situation in their thousands. They could not go back where they came from, and they could not proceed to their destination, which was further to the north in Europe. And they were caught up there either as, and they were detained, and they were, it was a terrible situation for them. Others who attempted to cross drowned in the Mediterranean. And right from 2018, when I was the chair of the African Union, we really discussed it with other leaders, and we was talking about trying to do something about it. And Rwanda offered to have these people come to Rwanda instead of getting caught up in that situation in Libya. And we offered to take them, or as many of them as we could in, and then later on process them properly. Now, it's from that vision we had about dealing with this illegal migration and different kinds of movements that we had this development came up between United Kingdom and Rwanda to say they are having a difficult situation of illegal migration, in which, by the way, so many people die, and the few who arrive there have arrived there through very illegal means, where the beneficiaries are those people who are involved. They are smugglers and getting a lot of money from that. But these are people's lives we are talking about. So then that's how we came to agree that in the same way, they are going to have a process where they'll be able to sort out legal and illegal migration and people under that. So the illegal ones would be brought here and processed from here, a stable environment, where the legal ones would go wherever they needed to go. Those who want to go back home would be processed to go back where they came from. And others would actually stay here if they don't have nowhere else to go. So it is also, in a way, it has a kind of choice. People either choose to go back where they came from, choose to stay, or we can have a third country that, if they want to absorb them because they think these are genuine cases, they would still be processed to go to those countries. So every aspect of it is well covered, and that is the origin of it.
Right.
And in fact, the resources involved in that is, one, to cover their health, their education, their livelihoods and accommodation while they are here. So people have jumped to conclusions and simply said whatever they wanted to say, but everything is genuine.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because it's been something that's out there. It's been sort of, looked at as, in my mind, a very interesting arrangement for people that are stateless, and essentially stateless for the time being, at least not having a home. Let me ask you something that we've often discussed, which is instability on your border, I watched carefully the African Union summit in Addis Ababa, and learned a bit more about the Nairobi and Luanda process, looking at both some of the European reactions and the US reaction. And I was very interested in the divide between what President Macron of France said about who's most responsible for some of the instability, and he put it right on the DRC's shoulders. The United States has often criticized Rwanda for supporting M23. There have been, even in fact, after our last conversation, with a lot of social media traffic about Rwanda's involvement in the DRC. But what I see happening out of this, is Rwanda applauding this East Africa Community Regional Force that's trying to look at the withdrawal of various forces, stabilize Eastern DRC. Do you have any confidence in that process? And what is the state of play today with the various factors? Do you think the United States is correct in any of its assessments of what's going on there?
Well, in fact, starting from what you said, it helps people to be clear about what's really happening if they choose to do so. Whether analysts or journalists or the general public listening to this interview, you can really make inference from these many positions people hold, but also from the basic facts of the situation itself. Because why there would be that difference between what France said and what United States said, I think would help people understand what is at play. Why would they have such a difference in understanding the problem and who is right and who is probably wrong? That can be deduced from that in actual fact. But let me say this. One, this crisis, the conflict in Eastern Congo, did not in any way start with Rwanda. Absolutely not. From basic facts, from facts that are on the ground. Rwanda did not start this crisis. It has just been dragged into it because of different reasons. Second, singling out M23 all the time, they may have different issues for which they should be blamed. That's given. But singling that out and emphasizing that and keeping quiet in most cases about other groups that are there is dishonest in itself. We have genocidal militias, FDLR and affiliated groups that have been there for now close to 25 years, and they have been a problem. They are registered, the problems are registered, are known by the UN, by the US, by Europe, by anybody. And yet, even with the efforts to try and deal with this issue, it has been there for these 25 years. One can really ask themselves, why? Why would it be there for this time? And people are ambiguous and silent and this about it. There is a reason behind. Maybe there is even a reason to preserve that, to continue to be there, to be used for one reason or another. There is no other way I can think about it. M23 also, the problem that was there in 2012, to be there again 2022, 23, because they started some 1 year ago or something, to be there for about 10 years and it comes back, says something in itself.
Right.
And that means it is a problem whose root causes were actually not addressed. And by the way, I also remind anyone that there have been agreements between that group and the current government and the previous government in DRC, none of which was honored, several of them. So, and then it comes back, it's as if people think it's a new problem, and then they don't even address the root cause. They still go back to just blame, And in fact, it seems there is more coming from outside of this region about that problem,
right,
and maybe other problems, than actually are within. Even with the DRC, I think the government of DRC is more or less told from outside what to do and what not to do.
right.
And they fail to address it as their own problem, and they are encouraged to seek pretexts or scapegoats for the problem they must address or even assisted to address. So,
well, do you see anything? Do you see anything hopeful in this East African Community Regional Force and also the African Union Summit in creating a pathway for the DRC to do? I mean, do you have any confidence that the regional enveloping of this, which we're seeing now happen, do you have any confidence, President Kagame, that that is going to untie this knot so that we don't have to talk about it all the time?
You see, that's the problem I was talking about. I really have confidence that the regional mechanisms, whether it is Nairobi or Rwanda or others that come together with that, these efforts can work. But can these external factors allow them to work? This is where the problem comes in. I give you a typical example where the region is trying to handle the problem. They are here trying to put in all efforts, and they're even asking for support from these outside players, some of them, these powers, who would even provide resources for the deployment of forces to go and, first of all, ensure that there is a ceasefire and there is disengagement, and then that must be accompanied by addressing the root causes, the political issues.
Right.
It will never be addressed by the fighting that has been going on. It's not a military problem. It's basically a political problem. But by the time the region, whether it is the AU or the East African or the Angolan initiatives are going on, then you have statements coming from faraway capitals saying, this, yes, we support this, but then they add their own angle to it. So, I mean, how do you say we support the regional efforts, and then you add your own angle to the solution of that problem that is really not helpful to the regional mechanisms and the region itself that is trying to be helpful? It has happened so many times. I mean, that's why you are saying, you hear, we are going to do this if you don't do that. But they are not talking about supporting the regional mechanisms, except in words, but then in actions, they are trying to add a different dimension that suits them.
Right.
And that does not suit them. So this is where the problem.
Yeah.
So the confidence I have for the region, no doubt, but then can our partners also try and be helpful instead of,
Right. Look, I've seen a lot of your statements, a lot of the statements from the African Union Summit, from the United States, commenting about hate speech, potential ethnic violence. I guess I have to ask this as someone who's watched and been amazed by Rwanda's development since one of the worst ethnic genocides in our era. Do you worry at all that the ingredients of ethnic genocide, whether in your country, elsewhere, are still out there from a national security and a domestic security perspective, how vulnerable are states in Africa to what we once saw in your country?
Well, to begin with ourselves, we are not naive. We know this is a huge problem that partly we have overcome, and there are seeds that you can see are being sown for future similar problems. And that is well associated with governance issues. There's no question about that. But again, there are these governance issues, then the root causes come, far back in the past in history, and they were never addressed. So, but this is not an insurmountable problem, really, in my view. But again, where there is poor governance, and where people, the leaders and so on, are not bothered about what affects the ordinary people, their countries, anything can happen. So, and that's why we encourage working together as a region beyond just one country grappling with its own problems, or between two countries trying to, well, between two countries is better than just one, but more countries being part of it is even much better. So that's what we try. So in our case, we see bad governance continuing to perpetuate this kind of a situation. And in fact, this is where I blame most some of these, I talked about external factors and actors. They talk about it lightly in the passing, or sometimes not at all. In fact, in one case, it was funny because when they were talking about the hate speech in the DRC that was going on, first they tried to remove responsibility from the leaders and said there were some individuals who were doing that. Then the second, they have also attempted to say, we urge both sides. I don't understand the meaning of both sides. Meaning between the perpetrators and the victims, you are urging that there should be no hate speech. I mean, how do victims get involved in hate speech? I don't understand, but this is said publicly by some people you would think know better, and really are so high up there placed to do better in that kind of situation. But that's what goes on. So really for us, we try to do the best we can, having learned lessons from our history,
right?
But we also are even more ready to work with others,
right,
to make sure that these things don't happen again. That's the best we can do.
Well, let me just squeeze in a couple more questions here real fast. I am fascinated by Rwanda's story. I've always enjoyed our conversations and find them so interesting. You went out to poll most Americans, though, and said, what do you know about Rwanda? What they know about Rwanda comes from Hollywood, from Hotel Rwanda, from the story of Paul Rusesabagina. And when you and I talked about that before, you made a very strong statement that you would not be bullied to change justice around Paul Rusesabagina. To my knowledge, that's largely the last kind of big news about his situation. Has anything changed since we spoke in December? Is there anything that you would like to share about his situation, or is it just the status quo?
Well, I will not repeat the joke I made about it, that we're going to do it if something happened, but I won't repeat that. I can only say there is work going on about it. We are not people who want to get stuck in one place and not make any movement forward for whatever reason. As you know, even our history, when we have wanted to move on and make this progress we talked about earlier, we came to a point where we forgave the unforgivable. That's how people, even who got involved in the genocide and so on and so forth, most of them have found themselves back into freedom. It is because of that we have in mind. We don't get stuck with our past. We move into the future. Sometimes it is very costly, but we think getting stuck with the past or just in the moment you need to change is much more costly than anything. So there is a discussion, there is looking at all possible ways of resolving that issue without compromising the most fundamental aspects of that case. And I think there's always going to be a way forward.
So if there is a way forward and you solve something, will you give me a call when you can talk about it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I will do that. Before anything is splashed out there,
we have a deal on that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, we're sitting at a national security conference, and honestly, when you look at the world, one of the things I've always enjoyed about our conversations is while you're focused, like a laser on Rwanda, you always have a great sense of other things going around the world. And a lot of the world is focused on Ukraine and Russia. What's China doing in the world? Spy balloons. What's America's agenda in the Indo-Pacific? And I'd just be interested, as you look at the rest of the theater of national security in the world, what most bothers you? What keeps you up at night? Does Russia's invasion of Ukraine matter to you, or do you think it's just part and parcel of the way the world operates?
Well, I'm bothered by the fact that the world is, in a sense, losing the center of gravity, if you will. It's like, as we know it in history, we have had such instability across the world and things happening that even, close to blowing up, and everybody is worried in the world and so on and so forth. But in some cases, you would have some rational actors among these powers that would step in and say, oh, come on, everyone is going to be a loser here. Why don't we find a way, of finding or negotiating this or deals there? But this time, everybody thinks of they are right. What they want is what must happen. But then you have so many of them thinking like that. And if we continue like that, by the way, we will all be victims, even those who have nothing to do with it. But I don't think they will survive themselves, because they've reached a point where the kind of language and so on is that of real destruction or even self-destruction. For example, when the use of nuclear weapons comes into conversation, it doesn't matter who brings it up, or who, it matters also the other one, how do they react and what is. But I don't think you would have a winner in this sort of a situation at all. It doesn't matter who starts it. It doesn't matter who reacts to it. It just means once you've reached that point, everything spins out of control. By the time you realize, even the one who started it or the one who says he can stand up to that will already themselves be in a mess. There's no question about it, and all of us for sure. So my bother is mainly that who calls things to come to some sense that then we should all rally around that, even small actors like ourselves, maybe chip in and play our part and say something. But before I come to the small actors, the big actors need really to be sensible, rational, and act in a rational manner that things stop getting out of hand under everybody's watch. And then by the time we realize, everybody's going to be a loser.
Yeah. Well, I think big powers should hear that perspective. Rwanda President Paul Kagame, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts at the Global Security Forum. And I'm going to follow up and one day get to Kigali and hope we can do one of these interviews right in your capital. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. All the best to you, and wish you the best in this conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just say that for those of you who are in this business, that's a very extraordinary interview. We have interviews with heads of government, but not normally that way. And what Paul Kagame wanted to convey and to share his mind with you is just basically how he looks at his map and how he looks at security situations. And I'm just really impressed that he gave that much time to the Global Security Forum. So thank you all. We'll see you later. And that Paul Rusesabagina commentary is probably going to make global news all over the world. So it's very interesting. Thank you all.